So listen, God doesn't want us to do away with our emotions. God wants us to have our emotions radically engaged. I mean, think of Psalm 84, verses 1 and 2. How lovely is your tabernacle, O Lord of hosts. My soul longs, yes, even faints for the court of the Lord. My heart and flesh cry out for the living God. I mean, that's an emotional statement, isn't it? It's not like, yeah, my heart and flesh cry out. My heart, and think about the engagement there. The radical emotions, a heart and flesh crying out for God. So crying out is not the problem. The problem is, what are we crying out for? See, the emotions in a vacuum are morally neutral. It's a matter of where those emotions set. So the first mistake that a lot of us make is we try not to have emotions. But God created us with emotions. He wants us to be emotional people. But the second issue that most of us have with our emotions is we have a tendency to trust our emotions. All of us struggle with believing everything that we feel. You guys know the bumper sticker, don't believe everything that you think? That's not a bad bumper sticker. There's some truth in that. But we also shouldn't believe everything we feel either. In a lot of ways, our emotions in our own lives, as they interact within us and with our relationship with God, oftentimes our emotions are our own personal Judases. You know what I mean by Judas, right? Judas who betrayed Jesus. Do you remember that scene in the garden when Judas came and he gave Jesus a kiss to identify him? And Jesus says to him, Judas, do you betray the Son of Man with a kiss? That betrayal with a kiss, that speaks of Judas's familiarity with Jesus. So you got to remember that when Jesus walked on the earth, it wasn't like there was no TVs in that day. There was no internet, definitely not internet on your phones. So it's not that everybody had a picture of Jesus. So when those soldiers and the temple guard had to arrest him, a lot of them didn't even know who he was. They had never seen him. They'd seen him at a distance. So Judas had to go on up because Jesus knew who Jesus was. And Judas gave him a kiss to show the people who they were supposed to arrest. See, our emotions function as our own personal Judas because for all of us, our emotions are very familiar. Now, in each one of our lives, we are all wired emotionally unique. Like for me, like I resonate with David in the Psalms because for me, David's got that musician thing. You know, like where you know, David is great radical joy and he writes a great joyful song about it. And then he's feeling completely depressed and he writes like a great like dirge. You know, and most musicians who are songwriters, they identify with these huge sways of emotion. It makes them great musicians and artists. Because they take all these feelings and they put them into music, and then you have this great joyful song, and you have this terrible, like, you know, stab yourself with a butter knife lament song about broken hearts. And that makes a good musician. You know? And so for me, in my experience, in my own emotions, is I have a tendency to be really super exuberantly joyful, and when I'm down, it's pretty not so much fun. So I resonate with David in the Psalms. But for some other of you, everybody experiences emotion, but it comes down to having an awareness of what does my emotional temperament look like. Some of you, you know, some of us have more even emotions where, you know, for me, maybe I express the emotions because I'm all Italian and so that's just kind of the culture that I'm in. Some of you have these strong emotions, but you don't see them, but they're under the surface. Some of us have a tendency to always see the glass as half full and are joyful, and some of us have a tendency to see the world as the glass half empty, and we're kind of melancholy. Some of us have a tendency to great anger. Some of us have a tendency to great jealousy. See, for each one of us, the Bible tells us that because when Adam and Eve fell, all of humanity and all of creation fell with them, we need to cast a doubtful gaze on the things that we feel. Because not always are the things that we feel true. We have a tendency to receive them as true because they're familiar to us. We're used to them. But oftentimes, our feelings have no biblical warrant. Like if someone came to you right now and said, listen, I feel like God hates me. Notice that I feel like God hates me. The question is, does God hate them? No. So at that point, this emotion, although very real, very provocative in their heart, it's actually Judas. It's betraying to them who they really are. And so most people in the world, they just believe what they feel. Well, I feel it, and that makes it okay. Just because you feel it doesn't mean it's actually founded in reality. And for so many people, their emotional lives are, they just go with whatever they feel. And if you guys, I mean, you guys know your emotions are about as stable as water, right? It's like within 2 seconds, we're all over the map emotionally, right? Crying, laughing, having a great time, having a miserable time. So for a lot of us, we make the mistake of believing everything that we feel, when in reality, we should cast a doubtful eye on the things that we feel. So notice this. God created us with emotions because God has emotions. Second, we have this issue with we either try and dismiss our emotions and not have them, put up walls, self-protect, or we believe everything that we feel. So what is the biblical prescription for us? And don't forget, I'll take all your questions after. I obviously can't touch on everything. The reality is that all people are called to place their emotions under the authority of Jesus. All of us. See, one of the things, when I was, as a lot of you know, I didn't grow up in a Christian home. I didn't have a Christian upbringing. I wasn't socialized in the church, any of those things. And when I was in college, I started reading every spiritual book I heard about. I just wanted to know them. I wanted to understand them. And I wanted to be like the one skeptic who read everything and could say, I don't believe in any of this stuff. I wanted to be the one guy who actually read it all, you know? It was kind of like an identity builder exercise that I was doing. And one of the things that I found when I got to the Bible is that I was so struck by the Bible's take on what it means to be human. Because in the Scriptures it teaches us that God holds us accountable not only for our actions, but for our motives, for our thoughts, for our feelings. That these things, every breath that we take, every feeling that we have, every thought that we think are of such immense value and have such serious existential consequences that God cares about them. And the Bible has, even though the Bible sees humanity as created in the image of God and warped by the fall, the Bible, Christianity has the highest view of what it means to be a human because there is the realization and the weightiness of the reality that everything about us is important. So important that God holds us responsible for them. I mean, isn't that kind of a powerful thing? That, you know, for most of us, we have an angry moment, we have a, you know, we get upset, and we say, oh, what's the big deal? It's a huge deal. Because everything that happens reverberates out into eternity, doesn't it? I mean, you ever see, I read it to my kids, there's a Dr. Seuss book where it talks about, you know, an ant stubbed its toe and kicked a tree and the acorn fell and the egg, I forget what it's called. It's a great kids book, you know? And it's funny, what's interesting about it is it's actually true. Like, the experiences that we have and the things that we express, we don't live in a vacuum. They actually have reverberations out until the end of time. And we can either say, well, that makes that's kind of terrible. That makes life kind of really serious. But guess what? Life is pretty serious. God doesn't want us to take lightly what is a gift.